Hi everybody, welcome to another Thursday tip and trick with Deb Tucker here at Studio 180 Design. And today we're going to talk about and demystify a technique that's called partial seams. Partial seams allows you to create blocks that have a rotation or a spin on them. Most often, partial seams are in association with rectangular sections being placed around a center square. This block that I'm holding in front of you here is called Roll the Dice. It's one of Sarah's Blockbuster designs from our Blockbuster program. And we're going to make one today that's even a little simpler than that so you can see how the process works. We're going to, instead of having a piece square in the middle, we're just going to have a simple square in the middle and 4 pieced rectangles that go around the outside. First recommendation, whenever you do this, make sure that you take a few minutes to lay your block out the way you want it to look. And because you'll keep coming back to that. Because there are different ways you can do this. I can take these, spin these rectangles around the other direction, and end up with a block that looks quite a bit different. So make sure that you have the blocks laid out so that they look like you want them to be when they're all done. Step 1 in the process, you're going to pick up one of the rectangle sections and the center square, and you're going to put them on top of each other. And what you're going to do when you do that, stitching, and you're going to have to pardon me because I'm going to sit here and do some stitching so you can actually see what's going on. You're going to line up the square corners that match. And when I go to stitch, this is what gives it the name, partial seam. I'm going to start at the edge of the block, and I'm going to stitch about, well, at least halfway down the square, but no further than 3/4. So somewhere between that 1/2 inch and that between that halfway mark and that 3/4 inch mark, add a little back tack. I'll put my leader back underneath here, ready for my next one. And what you're going to be able to see is that this is just a partial seam. So I've stitched part of the way down, more than half, less than 3/4, so that the back end of that seam is open. Now, when you see what I do going forward, you're going to understand why. After you've stitched the partial seam, press, generally, I press away from the center square, so that I'm pressing bulk out away. Position this back in your layout. And then what you can see is the remainder of the piecing is actually going to be pretty easy, because by partially stitching here, what I've got now, well, I guess we held it this way at the beginning. By partially stitching here, now what I have is a long straight edge that when I take the next piece and flip it over, I'm going to be able to sew all the way from edge to edge, like we normally do when we're doing our piecing. Line up raw edges, line up the corners, place it under your needle, stitch with your good 1/4 inch seam. Sorry, you have to suffer through me sewing here. I'm going to use my best piecing skills when I'm piecing in a hurry. But I'm sewing to the end, put my ender back on there, and when I open this up, you can see where we're going. So I've added the next seam. I'm going to take that, press it like I would usually press it with an iron, but for right now, I'm just going to finger press. And I'm going to take section number 3, rectangle number 3, flip it over, right sides together, and stitch it again from here to the edge. Line those edges up. Position this under the needle. Give it a 1/4 inch sew. Keep those edges nice and straight. And as I work through here, I'm creating a spin. So far, so good. And that last section is going to be a little bit tricky for me to get into and use that partial seam. So let's take a minute. I'll put this back the way that it was. This is how we originally had this. But now you can see where that partial seam is going to come in handy. That partial seam that was sewn here is going to allow me to move this piece out of the way and take section number 4 and stitch it in that same edge to edge that we've done with the second section and the third section. I'm adding that fourth section, but I need to move this out of the way. Give me a second to line it up here so you can see. I've moved this out of the way, so I'm only lining up what I need to stitch. And once I do that, a second, just under the needle. I don't know about you, when I sit down to stitch, I've always got my seam ripper handy because it allows me to make little adjustments without having to get my fingers up and underneath all the pieces all the time. Race my way to the finish line. Take off my leader and ender, place that back underneath. And this is what I have now. I have that first piece. I'm going to bring this back so we can kind of see where we started. We added, the partial seam was here on the lightest of the pieces. That's irrelevant, but added rectangle 1, added rectangle 2, added rectangle 3. Now what I'm going to do is come back and I'm going to reinsert my needle. Give me a second to just line this up so you can see what's going to happen. I'm coming back to that spot that I've already stitched. I'm going to reinsert my needle there and I'm going to finish that line of stitching down to the end of that piece number 4 that I added around that center square to give me a spinning look to a very simple couple of pieces, a center square and 4 simple piece rectangles. And there you have the mystery salt. You should never be afraid of partial seams ever again. How cool is that? Now, again, this block is very simple. It's 4 rectangles that are just half split rectangles placed around the center square. When we take a look at some of the other blocks that can be made with this, Sarah's block that was roll the dice has those same split rectangle units, but it has a square squared in the center. So having that little pop of color took a little more planning to get this block to come out right. But those rectangles don't have to be simple pieces. If you look at this block is what I call twister, and it's in my twister pattern. It's basically a combination unit with a pop color of corner on here, but I've added a rectangle here to create, let me see if I can outline it here, to create a rectangular section. So I started with a pink square in the middle, did a partial seam, added this rectangle section, added this rectangle section, added this rectangle section, and then came back and came across and finished that at the bottom. Here's another one. This one is called Shuriken, and it is another one of Sarah's blockbuster blocks. Very complex rectangle section that you see here. It's got, what do we have in here? We have half square triangles, we have split rectangle units here, split rectangle units here, but the whole section is pieced first, and then the rectangle section is added to the square in the middle to give it the spin that goes around the outside. And I'm going to show you one more if I can before I cut you loose. It doesn't have to be just, it happens frequently, and let's see how do we do this? I think we did it like this. So you can see this. This is my Northern Neighbors block, and this has a very complex rectangular section, but the block seems to be spinning because it's a rectangular section that goes from here to here to here. It includes the block and the flying geese and a sashin piece, but that section is repeated 4 times, and it's what causes this to spin around the center. So the next time you see partial seams in a pattern, don't be afraid of it. Dig in, realize that you can do it, and have fun with it. Don't let that scare you off. So That's it for today. We'll see you again next Thursday. We're going to try to keep taking mysteries out of our piecework. And actually, next week, what we're going to do is we're going to become block and pattern detectives. So you really are going to be taking the mystery out of things. Hope to see you then. Be well, be safe, be productive, and be creative while you're staying at home, gang. Take care. See everybody next Thursday.